So that was day 180. That was our support experience and what we're doing. Obviously, there's a lot more we can do. We know that. But we really need to get past, again, as I said, that baseline support experience you have today where basically you call in and you either play, oh, you're ticket you're number 5,000 with this issue, or this is interesting, let's go into log Fiesta. So the next part is, let's go back to our original two superheroes who built out this cluster. And it's been a year, and they're sitting down and they're going, I think we might need to add some more space. We need to look at that. Also, how did we build this? How do we add more space? This was so easy a year ago, I've completely forgotten about it. Again, they're staring off into space, and I'm pretty sure she's asleep while staring straight. But we've got to get through this. So one thing is to look at where the capacity is, and I'll show this with a demo here shortly. But one of the capabilities is you've got the built-in vSAN that has capacity monitoring and things like that. But we also have a management tool set within VMware called Virtualization Operations. What's powerful about this is this can help you with health and capacity management, not only of individual instances, but this can span multiple environments or multiple subtenants or multiple vCenters and things like that. Now, one of the changes we made is we've actually integrated this into the product where you get some basic functionality that is basically baked in regards to that. So we've got our existing environment, and we want to look at what's going on with the capacity within it. So if we go down, we can also look at just what's going on from the vSAN capacity, look at the breakdown, look at deduplication. We also look at what the overheads are. Is that data protection? Is that snapshots? Has someone just left a bunch of templates? iSCSI volumes coming off of vSAN, things like that. But we also have the ability to go straight into Virtualization Operations here. And previously, this used to be a separate pane of glass. It used to be a UI that, dare I say, was based on Flash, as terrifying as that sounds in this era. And one of the things we're doing is we're actually injecting Virtualization Operations in here. And if you don't have it installed, you'll actually get prompted for an installer that says, would you like to install this? Rather than have to manually go download some things, you can just put in your VMware credentials, it'll go log in, it'll auto download and pull it in. And even if you don't have a license, it'll deploy a trial environment with the full functionality. Now, baked into the vSAN are these built-in dashboards. So everything you see here that we're still within the vCenter UI, this is actually just bundled with vSAN. And again, I don't like talking about licensing too much, but we can look at and highlight, am I running out of compute or storage or other capacity? We can look at these issues. And if we choose to, we can look at which clusters are having issues. Now this view by default is just looking at my local clusters and that. We can also look at where we're going with that capacity. We can look at performance and so forth. Now if we want to drop into the actual full Virtualization Operations environment, it'll go ahead and open another pane. It'll log into that for me. Now this is, at this point, we've left our beautiful single pane of glass. We've gone to another pane of glass, but at least it's the same UI framework. It's Clarity. It looks very familiar. And at this point, we can start getting into more powerful, automation capabilities from a monitoring platform. If you've got, say, Log Insight that's injecting system events, you can not only see that, hey, CPU or capacity is high, but you can see why it's high. You can correlate those events from the event, the syslog feeds, and so forth, and overlay that.
$27.
It's a very small home lab that this was built on. So,
Oh, relative.
Just like the server.
I always love those savings. So in this environment, not only can we look at capacity, but we can also see over time. We can even see dedupe over time. So like at this point, we went from 4.2, and we cut down to half that. Maybe someone loaded a bunch of encrypted data into the environment. Which is always the fun Achilles heel of data reduction technologies. We can look at the CPU and those events over time. And at that point, we extend that. We can also look at time remaining. Maybe this was an initial. We looked at it more than a year. But as this gets down to a smaller amount of time, we've got to think about what are we going to do in order to get that that environment expanded and so forth regards to that. So we've gone through that environment. We've already added our hosts. We've already configured them. Let's say we will just want to add an extra fourth host in this environment. So we go back to that quick install wizard. And one thing, again, I want to highlight from earlier is it's great if you've got a tool that works on day 0 to help you build out a cluster. But if it's day 365 and I've completely forgotten how I built this environment or how I configured any of the hosts or what the VLANs were or things like that, it doesn't really help me. So I'm able to pick up where I left off in a brownfield environment and go through and add a host. So I'm adding that host. I can see that version. I'm going to add it into the environment. And then it's going to run through all those host checks I had before. Check NTP, check the firmware, check all those other settings. check the firmware, make sure the VDS is configured. So there's still some configuration. I needed to put the network configuration on that host. And so I'm going to go back to configure like I did before. And at this point, instead of having to configure the full distributed switch and all those other settings, it's going to pull them in from before and drop me down just to the basics where I set up the IP address for those. Again, this is the lab, so I'm just doing DHCP. I'm going to select those disks to add them to that vSAN distributed cluster pool. So now my storage pool is going to get bigger. And if I was doing fault domains, I would specify where those hosts go. And at this point, I've added that fourth host. I didn't have to call a storage team. I didn't have to call a storage networking team. Definitely no load balancing teams. I didn't have to go consult a bunch of documentation, which I should still have, but hey, the configuration is kept within this environment and it's ready to go. And if I go look, I can see that my storage is actually expanded. So that's day 365. So going back through kind of our history here, we started with day 0. We went through get the environment up. We also talked about some things VMware's done to reduce complexity and get those load balancers out of the initial configuration.
And not even load balancers, just the complexity of extra virtual machines, right? If we can get rid of that overhead of the external platform service controller and another virtual machine to worry about and build and and care that it's gone when it's gone, we want to make that experience as simplistic as possible. Yes, sir.
So, just flipping back a little bit for the day 180, right? So you said easy to add it. Probably the most common scenario, though, is I need to replace it, or I need to replace something that's failing currently. So I don't need to expand it necessarily, but something's actually going wrong with the piece of physical hardware that's resident. So is it the same process that you guys want people to follow in terms of this, or is that entirely different?
So if we talk about a replacement, are we replacing? If we're just replacing, let's say we had a drive fail or something like that, that's not really going to matter for this.
Right.
No, if we did replace a storage controller, and we got one from storage, and I love my server partners, but the nature of their parts bins is that that controller sits there for 4 years and gathers dust and has firmware from before time began. When I put it in here, this is actually the health alarms on here, which repull every hour, are going to light up like a Christmas tree and say, this is ancient firmware. Would you like to go through and apply the baseline and patch it? So if you had a component within that needed to be remediated, the health would take care of that. The other thing now, if you had an entire server fail, you needed to drop a new server in, you would still go through this add wizard in regards to that. Now, this isn't doing any type of weird like hardware underlay management. This isn't like a UCS, for instance, but we're not functioning on WWNs or any hardware. We don't care if the MAC address changes fundamentally, and we don't have fiber channel HBA, so we don't care if WWNs change. So the need to make sure that the underlay hardware is completely invisible from change to change, that's not something VMware necessarily cares about at our layer.
Yeah, but if you have a 3-node cluster, let's say, and one node fails, right? You're degraded. Yep. You're going to replace that node, do the add.
Yeah, just do the add wizard,
and it'll do everything in the background as far as completing, restriping.
Yep.
Doing what you got to get in your third copy, whatever you got.
So once those disks are added to the vSAN cluster, vSAN's, it's kind of cool. It's not a clustered file system. It's a distributed object storage layer. And the object storage layer is continuously pulling the health, and it says this object, it needs the witness component, it needs the second mirror, or so forth. It's going to say, okay, there's capacity. I'm going to auto start rebuilding. You don't have to go do anything from that perspective.
And the beauty there too is the 200 clicks that we kind of joked about at the beginning, right? So you have multiple clicks and you're not having to replace that server and then say, I'm going to go and click 200 times and get this guy installed because that's what I want to do all day, right? You can go back to this one interface because old life was multiple interfaces or multiple locations or tabs to get all of that information set so then your server can join the cluster. So. And
we've done some things with kind of state management. So you've got host profiles, which are good, but there's previously been some limits to that, and so this kind of helps close that. There's also some other areas we're looking at in that area also. I'll say that in kind of a vague way.
I didn't see any NSX. Did I miss the NSX layer stuff on this?
This isn't for NSX.
So NSX isn't this.
NSX, yeah.
Not yet.
Now, if you want something that deploys vSAN and deploys NSX and does the lifecycle of NSX2, you want to graduate to kind of that bigger framework. We have VMware Cloud Foundation, which actually does that full meta, full stack of everything. Okay. This is something for that environment that layer is either still manually managed for various reasons, or this is also for that environment. And this is something that, as we've built this, the automation layers for this, like the health checks and something like that, there are API hooks on the back end where VCF is piggybacking on that.
Because I mean, a lot of the environments we're doing now, especially with VMC on AWS, We get a lot of the smaller environments that would never thought about doing NSX, but now they do because it gives them that migration capabilities to go to VMware to the VMC, right? So you're going to see a lot more of the smaller environments that have NSX. Something like this would be beautiful.
So one thing that I think to help with that, so with that migration, that I thought HCX, which is basically just particularly for if you got an older environment that even predates NSX support, someone's still working 5.5 or something laying around. I want to say there's actually a wizard to help drive that from the vCenter side. But this is something, yeah, for full lifecycle stack, basically the next layer above this would be what's called vCloud Foundation.
Yeah. The customers aren't going to do that. The smaller guys don't want to.
Yeah, this is.
Right.
This is going to help, and really, I'll tell you, the sweet spot for this is probably going to be a lot of your more mid-size shops in regards to that. That said, there are full APIs, there are meta next steps, there are other things, so to speak.
We'll have to still manage the NSX layer separately after this.
Yeah, and within the context of this demo, that said, this isn't going to be angry that NSX happens to be there. It's going to coexist in regards to that. But yeah, if you do want that meta, I want a full upgrade. NSX, vRealize operations, all that whole, I call it the whole SDDC, software-defined data center enchilada, since I'm from Texas here. Whole enchilada, that's totally a Texas
burrito. Burrito.
That's VCF. So. Or obviously VMC, just because, VMC manages.
A lot of activity on VMC.
VMC is really cool. And everyone looks at it, and a lot of people, their first reaction is like, what is this? What is this?
It's just a big deal in your backyard in Houston.
What's really powerful there is, what version of VMC you're running. Don't worry about it. It's being continuously updated. It's being continuously managed. And they're actually, so these phone home dashboards I showed you, the support insight, that is actually something that the VMC SREs, they can leverage and they use. So they have all kinds. And what's cool with VMC is you actually have, you have site reliability engineers from the product teams directly assigned to that. So that's not just support personnel, but the engineering teams must own their code's function 100%. It's a true managed service. So if you're a product developer, you have to sit there and say, do I want to have engineers dealing with escalations, or do I want to just fix this area of the code? It actually drives some really good incentives, from drinking your own champagne, I think is the phrase.
So I just had a question in general. So obviously the vSphere Health is pretty new. So is that compelling to you guys? Is that something that you think we're going in the right direction with?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I know you said before, sir, that it's, customers really need to know about this beforehand. Before things happen, we don't want to put out a fire. Rather, have no area that's flammable, and take care of that. So. Working directly with our engineering team on this, I'm looking just to kind of get a feel of the room, just how that is. Are we doing the right thing? It seems like it. So it's definitely something that I'm excited about and see where that evolves to and kind of works in conjunction with all of our health programs. And I think I read some stuff from Justin the other day, self-remediation. Those are things that I'd like to see kind of come to that as well. If there's an issue that can be remediated without causing, an outage or causing some change management thing to happen and all that, I think it makes sense for certain situations as well. So,
and if you look at some of the announcements we made at VMworld around like Project Magma, this whole idea of a self-driving data center, there's a lot of apprehension on everyone's side for us to be automatically remediating things because we've all seen automated fixes go wrong at some point. But there already are some health checks that they're at kind of cruise control or kind of like Tesla, like I get on the highway and I push the button. There's things, we actually have some health checks that if there is just a simple of run a script to go clean something up, there are some remediate buttons on a few of the health checks already. And other ones, they'll at least, maybe not, it's not one click remediate, but they'll direct you to the area of UI of here's where you go fix this.
Right. And to be transparent to that, the vSphere Health being like the smaller child or the little brain, big brain between the vSAN Health, we're not at that level yet, and that's what we're looking to do as well, to be able to say like self-remediate or ignore that. I'm good with that. So those are things I'd like to see kind of come to fruition with that, and that's kind of like the goal is to make it more than just showing you what's wrong and then showing you the KB how to fix it, and maybe kind of joining those two together for simplistic remediations.
And one of the other projects we have is extending VMC, that whole management model to the edge, which you may have heard of Project Dimension. So in this case, we have edge clusters that are fully managed by our VMC team. Dimension often gets misunderstood too. It really is just VMC in a lot of ways on the edge. We've got other hardware partners. I think Dell and Lenovo are working for launch.
I'm sorry, you had a question, sir?
Oh, that was it.
Okay.
VMware Cloud on AWS, basically all the skill sets for managing those clusters for folks, because that's what you're doing effectively. I was assuming that most of that was flowing downstream from a sort of technical portfolio of what you're building there
Outposting.
come out.
Yeah, VMC on Outpost as
VMC
well
on
as
Outpost.
Dimension. That's really two sides of that coin, and
Yeah.
people have different. Obviously, there's going to be different supply chains and reaches with that. There'll be people have different investments and where they want to be in terms of that. But no, that whole it's you always hear these great promises at the if we're going to make a self-driving data center, but there's a lot of steps along the way, and this is stuff we've been working on for quite a while, and we've been refining and fine-tuning and making sure this stuff the API, even though all these UI stuff here, the APIs for that and for the health checks underneath to make sure that these processes are actually working cleanly, those are being consumed by higher level orchestration tooling. Making sure the firmware is updated. That one's an amusing one just because half the battle of that isn't just the code, it's the sheer amount of legal agreements that are required for us to distribute other people's firmware.
Yeah, I can
And
imagine.
that gets back to my very beginning of who is VMware. All these partnerships, they're bidirectional partnerships. We don't ever certify or support anything that we don't have written in blood a joint agreement between us and that hardware partner. And that's required for us to do these lifecycle things and do it right, because the amount of triple NDAs and things that have to be done between the OEM and us to make sure all this stuff works seamlessly as well as get anything fixed with it, it's really incredible. And so it's really hard to just be a software company on this if you don't have those partnerships and that leverage of those capabilities to get all this stuff working. So
Yeah, I imagine the dependency matrix is pretty ugly. So
yeah.
Hey, I think your self plug has been up there long enough. You can move.
Nice. I thought it was a flat jet. I didn't think it was him.
Did we get out free ebook?
I was going to say,
We hit that.
so the other thing I'd also like to point out is a lot of these click-through demos I was doing, which are obviously a lot less washed out, and when you do them normally than the alpha of this monitor being kind of crazy. These are actually on storagehub.vmware.com. You can find these under product demonstrations. Also, Nigel will want to plug.
So we also have, and this is super washed out here, I apologize. So vSphere Central is where tech marketing kind of creates our walkthroughs. But this site will be walkthroughs like John's site on Storage Hub. We kind of borrowed that framework from them as well. But not just blogs or walkthroughs, but KB articles, anything that relates to the topic. So for instance, we just added vSphere upgrade, big topic, getting folks off of 5.5 and into the 6.5 and 6.7 realm. When you're clicking on that, you're going to get everything related to upgrade. So if that's the documentation on the deprecation of Windows vCenter, or if that is anything with the platform service controller, you're going to see that in there. And you can export stuff to a PDF and take it with you and read offline when you guys fly home. So if you're really super bored and you want to sleep, we'd probably start with that, right?
So
Yeah.
quick question. Since you brought up the deprecation of the old vCenter,
Yeah.
when someone does an upgrade, is there anything in the wizard for an upgrade that would migrate them over?
Yeah, we have a migration.
So we have a migration, but there's nothing that says like, hey, customer, you're on the vCenter server for Windows, you need to get off of here. There's nothing that alerts them on that side. We've been talking about it for probably since like the end of 6.0 into 6.5 that it was probably coming eventually. And now that we're here, all of the installers to kind of answer that question. So when you download the vCenter server appliance ISO, you're going to have the folder in there for migration. And you can do the migration from your Windows over to the VCSA. So no problem there. And that has actually gotten better. In the past, it was like kind of like a little messy when it first came out in the 6 realm. It's way better now, and we have a lot of new features, like we can estimate the time that it's going to take, so you don't have to run a script against that to figure out the time. We're going to show you that right in the UI and say, okay, 35 minutes to move the VCSA or move to the VCSA, but if you want to bring over your historical data, it's going to be like 4 hours. So it can show you all that kind of stuff.
And do you really want the historical data?
And then you have some choices. So the good topic to bring up. So you have choices on what you want to do. So do you want your historical data or not? And we also offer a new option in 6.7 where you can import that data in the background. I didn't have a slide up on that.
But I want the
for that,
YOLO
but
mode. I just mash enter. And it'll
the one thing to note, the data in the background is only going to work if your database is external to your Windows vCenter server, because obviously during migration we down that server and then it's off.
because it's stealing the host name and IP and all that.
Yeah.
So.
The great thing too that customers kind of worry about is in the migration in the very beginning there was a lot of issues with bringing over the VDS. So we bring over that config too. So I've talked to customers that have created scripts just to bring that stuff over, and now they're like, oh, thank God, it's all in one place. So it's really nice. But the goal is still to get people off of that Windows
Well, and one of the
server,
preps for
so-
that is I think one of the last Windows installs actually migrated you to a Postgre database already, right?
Yeah, so one of the last installs that moved over to the database, and that probably helps migration. I don't know.
Because
if
then it's Postgre to Postgre, which makes it.
It makes a little. I don't know if it increases or decreases the time, but definitely kind of leads you in that direction. That hey, we're deprecating, and it's time to kind of move on from there. So, did that kind of answer? Yeah, cool.
And it's been a path for a while. I mean, like we deprecated DB2 a while back. You know, I apologize to those two customers. So.
So great resource, lots of stuff. Go ahead.
Yeah,
No.
question. Just a step back to day 180. Maybe it's out of scope, just tell me. Talking about logs, upload of logs and support, SC7 bug. What about Wavefront? Is it overlapping? It's not.
So let me think about what I can say here. Yes, it obviously. So
NDA.
we're using Grafana right there, just internally, because this tool actually dates back to an internal engineering, tool there for the early beta development of things, predating our acquisition of Wavefront. Now, obviously, it would. It would make a lot of sense for us to use Wavefront. Nothing against Grafana, I like it. It's just that it lacks some of the rich machine learning capabilities for anomaly detection. And we start looking at, if anyone here played with Wavefront or heard of Wavefront?
Heard of it.
Popular in the AWS and Apple land space. So what's cool with Wavefront is one, unlike a lot of your traditional monitoring tools, it's actually designed to handle data processing at a 5-second polling interval. So you can put in some crazy fast telemetry. And if you're trying to troubleshoot a dense application stack, it's a really cool tool. But actually, yes, there has been a lot of work. Actually, when we acquired Wavefront, there wasn't actually a plugin for Telegraph, I think, to get data or dashboards.
Wow.
So like we bought this tool that monitored everything except VMware. But no, that's actually been added. Getting the vSAN performance API into that, I'm not sure if we've published anything yet in that regard, but yes, that's been something that we've been looking at aggressively.
Thank you for answering that.
Wavefront's really cool because it's a SaaS-based application. It scales infinitely in regards to stuff. So it's using all those modern, I'm sure NoSQL and other. I always call them DevOps or hipster tools. So
The last couple of screens that we have, some resources here. So we talked about topology changes in the beginning, right? We're deprecating that external platform service controller. So our team has a topology and planning tool for customers and partners. It's super easy to kind of walk through. It gives you a little decision tree of, are you setting up your vCenter server? Are you doing embedded or external deployment? And then you can kind of walk through the steps. And at the end, it will give you a laundry list of what you're supposed to do, as well as a list of KB articles or any videos that we've created or blogs that are associated with that decision. So you have the path of what to do, as well as you have all the resources. So we leave that on the web page, as well as we have an option to put your email address in there and shoot that shopping list off to you so you know what to do. So 2 free tools. We have one for 6.5 and one for 6.7 that's been updated recently just after Barcelona VMworld. And should be able to kind of walk yourself through that. It's a really nice freebie tool for folks out there as well. And then John got a self-plug, so I'll take a self-plug as well. Myself and David Stamen from our technical marketing team just came out with upgrade ebook to 6.7. That URL will get you the book there. I will say that it is gated. It's got an email address, name, and you should be good to go on there and get that book downloaded. What we do is we kind of walk you through the planning stages as well as the execution. And we also give some examples of an environment with maybe Horizon installed or something with Site Recovery Manager installed, and what your path is to upgrade those components, because a lot of those things are kind of lockstep and some are out of the path of upgrade as well. So